Discovering Asian spirituality has radically shifted my life for the better as I wander in my Christian faith. Principles from Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, and Zen have all shaped the way I approach content creation and live streaming on YouTube. For those of you who are new here, I also work for Johnson & Johnson on robotic surgical innovation, and for the past 2 years I've lived in Japan, where I've been focused on connecting with Japanese clinicians, understanding their unmet needs, and leading engineers in the US to develop new technologies on their behalf. So hey, Pretentious Engineer here. I know you didn't ask, but welcome to your weekly one-on-one where I answer some of the internet's most challenging questions. This is a special episode as it is also my final paper and hopefully the last assignment necessary for me to complete my master's in global leadership, which I've been working on for the last 5 years while raising 4 kids. So, after the video, feel free to provide whatever grade you think I've earned in the comment section, as well as share any questions or thoughts you may have as we go along. Now, the goal of this paper or video is to explore ways that I can modify my live streaming experience to accommodate members of our community who come from various spiritualities, such as Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, and Zen, which is also kind of Buddhism. They're connected. So here's a roadmap to what we'll be exploring and how it can provide value to you in your unique context. So speaking of context, this exploration has 3 audiences, the first of which being me, which may sound a tad pretentious, but for the past 4 years, my wife and I have been content creators, welcoming folks into the frenzy of our lives as we raise 4 kids in Japan. We've built a humble community of around 40,000 people from around the world through our digital friendship, and for my final term at Fuller, I chose to study Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhist spiritualities because I wanted to face any blind spots that I have coming from a Western white Christian heritage. Thus, this video is really a capstone project of how I can create space for new friends coming from a faith or spirituality different than my own. Now, the second audience member is my professor, Professor Lo. Throughout this presentation, I'll need to demonstrate academic rigor, critical thinking, and praxis, which basically means that I'll be taking what I've learned and directly applying it into my unique digital context. I also want to take a moment to thank Professor Lo. It has been an honor and privilege to glean from you this term. Thank you for your grace and flexibility during this challenging season as my family's navigated the delivery of my 4th son, Akio. And even as you come from a Christian context, the way you teach Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism instills dignity in those who identify with said spiritualities. That dignity-giving approach is what I hope to navigate in this video. So thanks again for blessing me and my digital context. Which leads to you. If you have chosen to hang around, my hope is that you will be able to view practitioners of these alternative spiritualities with honor, dignity, and respect. They may follow a different spiritual framework than what you're used to, but they still deserve a seat at the table for discussions. During our discussion, I'll also assume that you have no working framework for what any of these spiritualities believe. So I'll contextualize my modules to accommodate anyone who wants to lean in and learn. Also, if you're a content creator or live streamer, feel free to directly emulate whatever practices of mine make the most sense to you. For me, my context will be running. Overall, today we're going to work through 6 modules. 6 in Japanese. They count with the finger. It's awesome. We'll be working through 6 modules that build on one another, culminating in a working framework that you can use within your unique context. This framework will allow you to create a more inclusive space for Confucian, Daoist, and traditional Buddhist and Zen spiritualities. The first module will explore how long-distance running has been a Christian spiritual practice for me personally over the last decade. And the last 4 modules will individually explore Confucianism, Taoism, traditional Buddhism, and Zen Buddhism using a similar process. In each of these modules, I'll provide an overview of the spirituality, general values that a believer would hold, and then accommodations I can make in my running live streams and content. The final module will explore these accommodations in my everyday life, sharing how these spiritualities have radically shifted my life for the better as I wander in my Christian faith. So let's get to it. So Christianity is kind of the first context. So even though I'm heavier set and have had a host of back and hip issues, running has always been a key aspect of my life. In high school, I began exploring with long distance running because of a severe concussion that ended my wrestling season, and I was the only lineman from football who competed in the 1 mile run for track. I finished last every time, yet typically received a standing ovation because of the spectacle of a big man finishing strong. Fast forward 10 years, and I've embraced the contradiction of the contradiction of my running journey through my brand DadBod. I put a GoPro on my head and I've recorded a 112-day half marathon training program to make running accessible to folks who are heavier set, have pre-existing health conditions, or prior injuries. Now, whenever I run, I bring a digital community with me via that small camera on my head. But what many don't know is that before my running became an external community-facing process, it was an internal spiritual process. Before years of physical therapy, I was only able to run about a mile per day. It was incredibly painful, and this pain functioned as a conduit for me to navigate the emotional and spiritual pain in my life. I would run half a mile warring with myself and with God, sit on a bench and pray, and then run a half mile back home ready to take on my day. Scripturally, there were many references to running that were meaningful to me during this season. First, coming from 1 Corinthians 9:24, do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one receives the prize, so run that you may obtain it. And then from Hebrews 12:1, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. This was actually my life verse for many years and helped deliver me from my pornography addiction so that I could run with perseverance in a life with Felicia, who's now my wife. So while the distances that I run in the internal versus external context have shifted, I still leverage my runs as a personal spiritual practice. On Wednesdays, I do my recovery run, which is surprisingly only 1 mile, which is not surprisingly only 1 mile based on the history of pain. And at half a mile, I wander down to the banks of Patakutamagawa River to pray. In the next 4 sections, we will discuss how I've intentionally shaped this process of the live stream so that it's still deeply meaningful to me personally, but also inclusive and dignity-giving to members of different spiritualities. So the first section we're going to walk through is Confucianism. All right. So one of my greatest learnings from this class was just how deeply Confucianism was integrated into Chinese and Asian culture. For instance, virtually all literate Chinese, particularly during the millennium leading up to the end of Imperial China in 1912, were Confucian schooled and Confucian socialized. It was humbling to understand the scale with which Confucius's teachings reached globally. This was one of my first wake-up calls concerning my white Western Christian biases, as I had unconsciously discounted Confucianism as a valid or an invalid spirituality. Now, I'm not an expert in Confucianism or any of the spiritualities we'll review, so I invite you to challenge or correct me in the comments if any of the following insights drift a bit off course. It's also kind of late, so I might be making a mistake. We'll see. All right. So now I struggle to define Confucianism, which is why I actually prefer to define it in comparison to Neo-Confucianism, which came right after. So we're going to read this quote. Neo-Confucianism represents a reworking of Confucian tradition. It upholds the values and ethics of classical Confucianism, but reorients that Confucianism is in 2 important ways. It grounds the values and ethics of classical Confucianism in an elaborate system of metaphysics, and on the basis of this system of metaphysics, it creates a structured program of self-cultivation, a step-by-step template for becoming a sage, with a sage's obligation to better themselves morally for the purpose of serving society and promoting the welfare of others. So some of our first values of Confucian and Neo-Confucian thought is that we're going to go through this journey of self-cultivation so that we can serve our community. Thus, the concept of becoming a sage didn't reflect withdrawing from community, but rather leading as a wise king. An additional value of Confucius thought is commonly known as ancestor worship, or what my professors redefined as ancestral veneration. The intent of ancestral veneration is to respect and honor where we come from concerning our lineage. This also means caring for our ancestors' graves as a service to them for what they've passed on to us. Now, Yi Wang Tolgin was a gifted leader in Neo-Confucianism who crafted the 10 diagrams, which I love. As an engineer who loves Visio flowcharts for processes, Togei's work is incredible. Basically functions as a process flow for our lives so that we can learn to lead well. When we start thinking about accommodations for Confucianism, I would like to leverage Chogi's 10th diagram for cultivating mindfulness. This diagram stresses the importance of being industrious during the day, alert at night, reading books, responding to affairs, awaking early, and rising at dawn. As I provide context to my community about the prayer session we're about to have on a run, I usually share the historic value that running has had for me, including this set time for prayer in the middle. I also stress that for 5 minutes, I'll provide an interfaith or interspirituality moment of prayer and or mindfulness, that we live in a culture of swiping and noise that limits our ability to put our affairs in order. And calling on Togei's diagram, I can share how this moment of mindfulness is linked with walking or waking at dawn so we can reflect on past faults and find a proper order and sequence for our day to follow. Thus, I'm bringing my community into a shared, cultivating moment of mindfulness so that we can then structure our days better, and this will lead to them doing better in their respective contexts. So that's Confucianism. All right, Taoism. I fell in love with this aspect of spirituality, like WuWei. Yes, okay, let's get into it. WuWei is fantastic. So Taoism provided China with an alternative value system or structure other than Confucianism. One key aspect of Taoism established by Lao Tzu is the concept of WuWei. WuWei has a rather enigmatic definition. It is the act of inaction or effortless action, or some would say non-action. And I found this incredible video on the concept, which I'll link in the description below. It is a 10 out of 10. So if you're interested in this concept, just go watch the video and come back. But in essence, WuWei emphasizes aligning our actions with nature and flowing, not forcing anything. The assumption is that you're trying to control or manipulate your little world. You can only The assumption is that if you're trying to control or manipulate your little world, you only create more work as opposed to flowing with the natural progression of nature. As I live and work within an innovation culture of progress and control, the concept of WuWei blew my mind. I've started reimagining how I can control less pieces of my life and stop wasting so much time striving by finding an alternate path. Now, another value of Taoism is to eventually live as a solitary individual who could roam as one wishes and at ease. This comes from the teachings of Zhuangzi, who leveraged rich parables to build a case for detachment. Now, concerning values, major values of Taoism thought begin with detachment and freedom from the bondage of worldly values. Professor Lowe contextualized this as roaming as one wishes and at ease. There is no merit or success from our hard work or ability because favor and luck are always a key factor, and fame and desire to influence also have limited value. Thus, the goal is to detach and oneness with nature, no self, withdrawing from society and going with the flow of life. For accommodations of our running ritual, for me, it's difficult to embrace a complete detachment from our communities. That aspect of Taoism is tricky for me to create space for. I genuinely want to build people up, cultivate them so they can go back into their context and change the world, which is more Confucian in thought as opposed to Taoist. That said, from an accommodation perspective, WuWei, or action in inaction, is something that I can definitely create space for during my live streams. As we prepare for our time of prayer and mindfulness, I can encourage our community to consider what uncontrollable aspects of their lives they are still trying to change. As I set my GoPro by the river, I can invite them to consider an alternative path that may flow in a more natural direction. And then when I go off to pray, I can hand my striving and desire to change back to Christ and trust him to redirect my path personally. But I need not project that onto members of our community who value Taoism instead. And then now that we're moving on from Taoism into Buddhism. So if you weren't familiar with Confucianism or Taoism, it's likely that you've at least heard of Buddhism. Buddhism begins with four noble truths: the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the ease of suffering, and the true path leading to the end of suffering. Now, the cases of our suffering, or the causes of our suffering within a traditional Buddhist framework are greed, hatred, anger, and delusion or ignorance. Thus, we'll see many Buddhist practices are working to overcome causes of suffering through the Eightfold Path. I'm not going to read all 8 of the Eightfold Path. You can Google it. One of them, though, is right mindfulness. Now, one of my favorite videos from my studies with this lecture was on Thich Nhat Hanh, who provided many teachings on mindfulness. I'll link a clip to him as well. Very, very interesting and helpful for me to kind of understand what is the intent of being present and finding happiness or joy and opposed to suffering in various mundane experiences of our life. And that if you could find the right mindfulness, concentration, and insight, that generates the energy to make a Buddha that makes you come awake within that given context. For values, when it comes to the values of Buddhism, there's 6 perfections to strive for. You have generosity, morality, patience, vigor or diligence, concentration, and wisdom. These are all good things that anyone of any faith context can appreciate or respect. Concerning accommodations, for that ritual or routine of prayer and meditation, I'd like to return back to that video of Thich Nhat Hanh that I described. There's one section where he explains that he could find joy and a sense of purpose just from cleaning each dish or taking each breath, or his ability to walk because he's able to walk. Like, finding that sense of gratitude in all things was really inspiring for me, because I have like endless chores and endless dishes with all my kids, and I don't smile during those chores. So it's very humbling. But if we're to bring it into the live streaming environment, following my time of prayer and mindfulness, we can celebrate the joy of consistently taking the time to wake up early, put on our shoes, run out to the river, take pause in mindfulness. I can encourage the community to celebrate where they can find joy and happiness in the simplicity of their lives, in those little moments like what we're having together right there. All right, so moving on to Zen Buddhism. Now, Zen Buddhism, or Chan, I'm moving quickly because I only have 7 more minutes for my assignment, so I gotta wrap. Now, Zen Buddhism, or Chan, from China, marked a departure from certain aspects of traditional Buddhism. The practice of Zen Buddhism comes from a frustration with traditional Buddhism, which relied so heavily on academic study, thus missing actual enlightenment. There is an allegory of this finger pointing at the moon, which claims that we get so fixated on our finger, which is the study or process of trying to find the moon, rather than the moon that it's pointing to, which is your Buddha or your enlightenment. Because of this, different practices focus on intuitive wisdom were developed. One practice of Zen that I was intrigued by are koans, which are aggressively paradoxical stories that fragment the mind beyond simple deductive thinking. As an engineer, like, stories that don't make sense is really stressful, so I kind of want to experience that a little bit. And these koans would be leveraged by teachers during an encounter dialogue to guide the students towards the spontaneous sense of enlightenment. Now, concerning values, because Zen Buddhism departs from academic study, it stresses the value of a guide or sage who walks alongside you in your quest for spontaneous enlightenment. There are also long periods of silence and reflection necessary in order to have these breakthroughs. So for accommodations, I found that the concept of koans and encounter dialogues are very interesting. And if a member of our community was receptive to challenging conversations, perhaps we could try exploring a koan before or after the period of prayer and meditation and continue to chat through it and kind of unravel together. This process, additionally, the moment of stillness by the river and prayer and meditation would be well contextualized to someone practicing Zen as well. And there you have it, 5 modules that reinterpret a personal Christian rhythm of running in a way that makes it accessible to a wider spiritual digital context. Now, as we move into the praxis or application section, I would invite you to first recognize that you don't need to dilute what you believe to be proximal to someone different than you. As a Christian, there will be certain aspects of various faith or spirituality contexts that I can't fully embrace. But at the same time, while holding on to aspects of our own deep difference, we can stretch ourselves empathetically into someone else's worldview. I would encourage you to have an inquisitive spirit concerning how you bridge across this deep difference. And it's different for whatever industry you work in, or if you're a content creator, curating a community across all these deep differences takes intention. The world is divided across Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and so much more. As we invite others into the frenzy of our world, two worlds ultimately collide. Our contextual understanding of one another shifts and adapts. And over time, we can learn how to restore dignity and value to one another in these collisions. So let me conclude with a brief story. In my youth, I used to do missions work in Japan. My wife and I would fly to Japan for the summers and help small churches meet local needs in their communities, such as English, cooking classes, and sports camps. This is before J&J relocated us for engineering. Naturally, evangelism was also a component of these activities as well, so we had lots of interfaith dialogue with members of Shintoism and Buddhism in Japan. Yet over the years, I've received so much love and grace from the Japanese Shinto Buddhist friends that we've made. And this has just given me a deeper appreciation and respect for their worldview and the meaning that they derive through it. Well, one year, we brought 2 extra team members with us on our missions trips. And we visited Asakusa Temple, which is in Tokyo. This temple is also called Sensoji. And if you ever go to Japan, you should definitely stop by there. Maybe I'll do a tour guide video on it at some point. But anyways, it's an active shrine. You can see people paying money for tokens, clapping, burning incense, praying to various deities. And as we were visiting with some local Japanese church members, one of the US team members exclaimed, "This is crazy. Like, how could they actually believe any of this?" I immediately recognized a look of shame, almost pain, on our Japanese Christian friends' faces. To smooth over their embarrassment, I replied to the team member, "Consider it the other way. To the Japanese, it seems crazy that God would take on flesh, walk among his creation, die, and give new life to them through faith in him. Neither perspective makes sense to the other on the surface level." This story and my learnings from this class invite us to embody a holy humbleness with how we find meaning in the world. Many have the audacity to claim they've found the truth, so I invite you to weigh your own beliefs before casting judgment on others and dismissing them. And with that in mind, may you be a blessing to the Confucius, Daoists, traditional Buddhists, and Zen Buddhists that you cross paths with in the years to come. May you delight in one another's presence, and may you both grow because of it. And as always, keep changing the world. See you around, friends.